Enver, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Thanks for joining us. So welcome everyone to our final Titan Zoom for 2021. And what better topic than the topic of destinations? We're at the last of our three-part series for Leadership DNA, and we're really fortunate to have Ed Anoba with us, again, a leadership expert in his field. And for me, the unique sharing of his is tying the leadership principles to ancient wisdom principles that really apply in all circumstances when we know them. So Ed, thank you so much again for joining us again today.
Thank you. Again, it's a pleasure to be with all of you. I'm going to get straight stuck in because as always, there's so much we can discuss. Let me start by sharing my screen and then we'll, let's go back. Okay. So can you first of all see my screen?
We can.
Okay, so let me just make this full. So this is our last installment. So we were talking about three different aspects, and we were saying in our first session, and we reiterated how, according to Vedic knowledge, there are certain underlying blueprints of reality. And we wanted to look at those underlying blueprints in terms of how they can apply across different situations, but especially in leadership. And we want to give some examples in relation to this. So we're discussing leadership DNA. We said the three constituents. I'll give the Sanskrit, then the English. The Sanskrit was Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana. And when we think about it in terms of application, we could say the Sambandha relates to the direction, understanding the reality so we can understand where we need to go. The drive relates to execution, right? So making sure we can actually push, do something, to execute, to act, to achieve. And then the destination relates to the objectives and the outcomes. So what we explained is that these models that we get from the ancient Vedic literature are complete paradigms. In other words, you can understand many, many situations when you understand these three components, and you can see how they apply across various situations and circumstances. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. We wanted to give you some examples or applications of how each of these play out in terms of the field of personal development or even business. So we wanted to start here. So we said the Sambandha, which is direction, which is also being in touch with the reality. One of the most repeatedly used tools in leadership, in business, is the SWOT analysis. Okay, and many of you will be familiar with the SWOT analysis. The key emphasis here, the key principle, is that we want to understand the lay of the land. We want to understand the situation, because depending on how well we understand what we're dealing with, the situation, that then determines so many other things. So I was discussing with some friends recently. So certain things we've tried to get done over the years, and I saw sometimes it didn't quite work out the way it did. And I tried to understand why, what was missing. And as I did this analysis, it became increasingly obvious that in some situations we were working with people who had other agendas, right? So let's say you're in a situation where your whole agenda is to give, but then someone else, they have a different agenda. So rather than everyone working together to make a collective offering, you have some who are working to make a collective offering, some who are working to contribute, but others who are working to take for themselves. Okay, so when the understanding of the reality, when the understanding of the situation is deficient, is inaccurate in some way, shape, or form, it always leads to inefficiencies. Okay, it always leads to issues later on because we did not know the reality that we were dealing with. And I'll give an example, and I know Ricken will relate to this. So in some projects that Ricken and I have been and are continuing to work on, we may have someone who's a bit political, okay? So if you know that they're political, then you can adjust accordingly. Then it's like, okay, so we know that they're political. We know that therefore we have to navigate the interactions with them in a particular way in order to reach our destination. Now, if we don't know that they're political, right? And I want you to really think about this in terms of your organization, your company, your teams, your network. If you deal with members of staff or members of your network and you don't know that they're political, you think that they are completely altruistic, they can cause a tremendous amount of damage in terms of whatever you're doing. They can cause inefficiencies. They can cause more politics. They can create misinformation. They can create reputational damage. And then what happens, and this is why I love this model, what happens is because you misunderstood the situation, the reality, then when you come to the next stage, which is drive, you actually end up doing more work. You see? Let's use another analogy. One of the biggest mistakes that companies make across the board, which can cost them literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, is the wrong hire. Okay? Some of us may have experienced this. You bring the wrong person into your project, into your company, into your team, and the cost can be extraordinary. Let's explore this. When you bring the wrong person into your organization or project, what are some of the costs that you have to bear by bringing the wrong individual into whatever you are doing? Let's look at this. What are some costs, Ricken?
Extra time to deal with potentially conflict.
Yeah, now tell me more. So why would the wrong person cause more conflict? I get the time. Expand on the conflict piece for me.
So they may have when they have a different motive or agenda that's not consistent with the values of the rest of the team, they can also infiltrate and impact others in a negative way.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also, it's so interesting. I've been discussing this with managers for many years. Ricken, what does it also do to the team's perspective of the leader who brought that person into the team or the organization? Any thoughts?
Resentment, there is lack of credibility.
Yeah, exactly. So now everyone's questioning the leader. Well, you're the one who let them in here. We could see very clearly that this person was a bad person to bring in, but you still allowed them to come in. So now the next decision that you're making as a leader, I'm questioning it. Because if you've made that bad judgment that we're now all impacted by, what other things are you misunderstanding? What other judgments are you making wrongly that's also causing us to be damaged in some way? So Ricken, you're right. There's cost in terms of time. Avantika, absolutely. There's reputational damage to the leader because it's considered the leader has bad judgment. What else? You bring the wrong person in. What are some of the other impacts that the wrong individual, again, because we didn't understand the reality of who we were dealing with, what we're dealing with, what are some of the other costs? And this is costs that the companies bear across the world. Any other costs? Anyone else? Yes, Avantika.
The opportunity cost of having the right person in that job is huge because, so it's the opportunity cost.
So tell me more though. Tell me, what do you mean by the opportunity cost of having the wrong person in?
So all of this time and effort and energy which is going in training or managing or over managing the problem person, that's one aspect of cost of time and energy. But actually the gap is even more than that, because the opportunity of having the person, the right skill set, the right mindset, the right energy, that gap has not been filled even after all of the training and management of the problem person.
Absolutely. So my own spiritual teacher, he explained that it takes 6 times as many resources to train a new person than it does to keep someone who's already in. So when we lose people, because oftentimes it's not known that this person is the wrong person. So a lot of time and energy and effort is invested in the individual, then they go. And then we have to then find another person, which takes time, and bring another person in, which takes time, and train another person up, which takes time. The beauty of this model is you can see that there's a, as you said, Avantika, there's a trade-off between each of these different stages of the situation or the reality, the execution, and the goal. If I choose the wrong things in the beginning, it actually means I'm going to spend a lot more time and energy doing work later on. You see? So these three stages, direction, drive, destination, they're not all equal actually. If you get the first stage right, it gives you less work to do in the second stage, and it gives you more outcomes in stage number 3. Make sense? So many businesses, and this is the amazing thing, many businesses, they don't realize that because they're not properly strategic, they spend literally hundreds of additional hours and huge amounts of extra energy having to do extra work because the first stage was not done well. You see? It's a really important point. The more you're expert in strategy, the more every minute of execution gets you greater outcomes. Okay? Very, very important point. What does it do? When I hire the wrong person or bring the wrong person in terms of the project, what does it do to the motivation of everyone else in the organization or in the project? Any other thoughts there? Any thoughts? If I bring the wrong person into the project or the organization, I hired the wrong person, what does it do to the motivation of everyone else and why? Thoughts?
It'll usually negatively impact motivation.
Why?
Because they're all having to potentially work harder to do, you know, what they've been assigned to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Or they're either maybe they're picking, you know, they're picking up for that individual. They have to redo potentially what that individual has done. And so then it'll create some frustration in them.
Absolutely. Ricken, have you ever seen that happen?
Yes.
I had a feeling the way you spoke about it. I know Ricken's very excellent execution, you know, very powerful in that sense. So having to do that is very demeaning. It can be very demoralizing or demotivating, because now I see the other person and I see that they can't do the job, but they're being paid just like I am. But I see that they can't do the job, they're being paid, and I'm having to do their job as well as my own job. And the resentment can come in, and that can also lead to office politics. Right? That can also lead to office politics. It can lead to more complaints as well. So when we get this right, we actually save a huge amount in terms of energy for execution. So let's move on. So we talked about the example here that this direction is around really understanding the reality. And the point that we were making is if you get the first stage right, your drive becomes more powerful. So in a previous session, we talked about this second stage, this Abhideya, which is around execution, around energy, around movement. And we gave the example of resilience. So we talked about how the team who do not look after themselves, they always have diminishing execution, right? We know from the studies that when people are, let's say, unhealthy, bad sleep patterns, tiredness, all of these things means that the quality and the quantity of their drive, of their execution, definitely goes down. So one of the things that we asked you to look at in a previous session was your own personal resilience and well-being practices. And we also spoke a little bit about making sure that we promote that in the team. Because if the team are in good shape, they can do optimal work. And we emphasize that optimal means two things. We mean optimal in quantity, but we also mean optimal in quality as well. Okay, I'm sure we've all seen sometimes, let's say that you're really tired, you've not been looking after yourself properly, your ability to make healthy decisions, to pay attention to detail, to be conscientious, all of these things start to go down. So this second stage, and again, it's a language of leadership. It's a language that applies across the board. Situation, then activity, so drive, execution, then we go to the next phase. So an example of this is why in many companies, they spend a lot of time and energy on resilience, on wellness, on making sure that people are in good shape, because they know it automatically feeds into the outcomes that a person is able to achieve. Now, this session today will be focusing on bringing all of the 3 different stages together. And as you can see here, the 3rd stage, destination, means outcomes, objectives. We want to give you a few things to think about in this particular area. Let's see how we do this. So let's go here. I want to present to you a model. And you can find this model if you want to dive into this a bit more after this session. There's a lot online about this model. But I thought I'd like to share this model with you, because what it does is it's a very wonderful example of how, as I said, the Vedic blueprints are present in many contemporary systems which relate to leadership, which relate to management, and which relate to effective execution. So there's a model we're going to go into today. And this model is called the situational leadership model. I'm going to give you a visual of the model, then we're going to start to break this down, and we'll talk about how this can be applied by you as leaders in your day-to-day leadership and management. Okay, so let's start here. So let me just see if you can see this properly. Let's go back. Okay, so one of the biggest issues that managers and leaders have is an issue around how to allocate time and energy to get things done effectively and efficiently. Okay, it's a really important point to begin with. We know in the business field that time is money, right? Anyone have a disagreement with that? We know that time is money. What we're going to show you in this particular model is a very simple way of really utilizing your time and energy and that of your team in a much more efficient and effective way. And I'm going to show you how this model uses these 3 dimensions that we spoke about from the Vedas. So it uses an understanding of the situation, or you could say even the task, the objective. It uses an understanding of mapping the reality based upon the individual. And then it also, having understood these 2 things, allows you to work out how you lead a specific individual in order to achieve a particular outcome. Okay, this is where we're going to go in this particular model. Okay, so let's start the journey here. The first stage, and I'm going to walk you through this. We'll try and use some examples as well. The first stage is choosing a particular objective, right? So we said today we're going to look at outcomes. So imagine the following. You have a member of your team, and let's make it broad. You have a project. In your business, you have a particular project, and within the project, there are a number of different activities that need to get done. Okay, so you decide, okay, today we need to focus on creating the advertising for one of our company's initiatives. So there's a few things involved, and one of the key things is I need to put together an advert for a particular initiative that the company is doing. So I start by choosing the task. So this is the first step. And that task I'm choosing, it means it's an outcome that I want to be achieved. Okay, so we're choosing the task, which means we're choosing the destination. We're choosing a particular outcome that we need to achieve as an organization. Now, the second point is we've got someone who's going to do it. Okay, I'm going to allocate someone in my team this task. You need to create the advert for this initiative. But here is where the problem usually occurs. Here is where the problem usually occurs. I've chosen the task. I've chosen the team member who's going to do the task, but they need a certain level of management, leadership, and support to make sure that they can get the task done in the way that you need it to be done. This is where many companies start to lose efficiency, where they lose effectiveness, where they lose relationship. Because if this second stage is not done properly, it starts to create a negative relationship between the leader and the team member. So I chose the task. We need to get this advert done. I've given the member of my team the particular task that I want them to achieve. Now, this is where the model comes in really, really effectively. Welcome, Paul. Thank you for joining. Thank you. No worries.
Sorry I'm late. Nice to see everybody.
Good to see you too, sir. Thank you. In this situational leadership model, which I think, to be honest, is a brilliant model, and I really encourage you, you can use this the moment we finish this session. You'll be able to start using this model. And if you use this model with your current team, you'll be able to start to see a complete shift in terms of how you can allocate your time, your energy, your resources, your team's time, energy, and resources to get better outcomes. So I've chosen a team member, and the mistake that most managers make at this point is that they give that team member the same type of support to get the task done. I repeat, most managers at this stage, they've got the task, they give it to a member of their team, and they give that team member the same amount of support or guidance to get the task done, which is the number one mistake. Okay, why is it a mistake? I'm going to go back and show you why. Let's just do this. It is a mistake for the following reason. On the screen here, you can see the model. I want you to give your attention to the bottom of the screen where you have these 4 Ds, D1, D2, D3, and D4. What I want to talk about is these 4 levels of development. Okay, and I want you to write this down because this will be important for your future use of this model. D1 means low competence and high commitment. Okay, I'll repeat that. D1 means low competence, but highly committed. Okay, D2 means low commitment, low to some competence, and that's all D2, right? So D1 is low competence, high commitment. D2 is low commitment, but low to some competence. Okay, I want you to write that down for D2. D3 is variable commitment and moderate competence. So that's D3. I'll repeat. D3 is variable commitment. So the commitment can be up and down, but there's moderate competence. So the person can do that task. And D4 is high competence and high commitment. Okay. Do you want me to go through those 4 again, or is everyone on the same page? If anyone needs me to repeat anything, okay. Okay, you want me to repeat, Enver?
Second one, please.
No problem.
D.
D2. So D2 is low commitment and low to some competence. Okay. Is there any other area that needs to be repeated in terms of the
Thank
4
you.
Ds?
Can you mention number 1 again?
Yes. D1 is high commitment and low competence. That's D1. Fantastic. These 4 Ds relate to this idea of direction. It relates to really understanding who you are dealing with in relation to the task that you've given them. Okay. Now, if I give a task of creating a poster to someone who has a history of doing them. They've been making posters or advertisements for the last 20 years. They are very enthusiastic. They love doing it. They've won awards for doing it. They do a better job than even they often exceed my expectations when I give them that task. Then what is the development level of that particular individual in relation to the task? Are they a D1, a D2, a D3, or a D4? What would you say?
D4.
Absolutely, Christina. Christina, how do you know that they're a D4 though? What did I say that led you to the conclusion that this person in relation to this task is a D4, Christina?
They have a high competence and high commitment.
Absolutely. High competence, they've done this before. It's not new to them, right? They love doing it, so they're committed, they're motivated, they're self-motivated. They've won awards, we said. They do a better job than even you expect, so they exceed expectations. Now, if I give that same person, right, so it's the same individual, if I give them something that they've never done before, are they still a D4, yes or no? Avantika.
If their skills are transferable, they could retain the D4, but if it's usually something they've never done before, they might temporarily transition to a D1, which is they'll retain the commitment, but they'll need some upskilling in the area.
Okay, but let's take it further, Avantika. What if I give them something else to do, they've not done it before and they really dislike doing that task?
So I'll go one further, that in that case, they'd come down to obviously, D3, sorry, D2, which is where, it's like the commitment also is low. In fact, I've seen some teams where the experts who are very seasoned also sometimes lose their commitment because they feel that they're under someone that they don't respect, or they feel that, they should be the leader. And so sometimes just knowing the job well isn't enough.
This is a great point, Avantika. Thank you. So what I really want to emphasize to all of you here is that someone may be a D4 in one task, but the same person, if you give them something else to do, they may not be a D4 anymore in that particular task, because to your point, Avantika, which is completely correct, and this is what the model really talks about, is that no one is a D1 or a D2 or a D3 or a D4 in everything. It's task specific, right? And we know this. We know that someone is an expert in one field. If you put them in another situation, they're no longer an expert. Yeah. Now let's take it further. So let's go back. So the person who I've given this task to of making the advertisement, they've done it for years, they've won awards, they do a consistently good job, etc. So we know that when we give them tasks, they're a D4. Okay. Now, if you look on the page, on the screen, you got S1, S2, S3, S4. What I want you to pay attention to is the axes. So along the bottom, you can see it says directive behavior. Along the side, it says supportive behavior. So if someone is a D4, that means they're very committed. Do they need a lot of encouragement? If someone's very motivated and committed to doing something, do they need a lot of encouragement? Yes or no? They don't, right? So we know that if they're a D4, they need very little support, if any, because they themselves are motivated, they're enthusiastic, they want to do the work. Now, if someone is highly competent, do they need a lot of time to explain how to do it? Yes or no? No, exactly. So we know they don't need a lot of direction and guidance because they've been doing this for 10 years and they won awards for it. And they do even better work than we expect them to do. So they don't need a lot of guidance or direction, and they don't need a lot of support. So looking on the screen, as a leader, what kind of behavior would you give them? Would you be S1 behavior if they're a D4? Would you be S2 behavior if they're a D4? Would you be S3 behavior if they're a D4, or would you be S4 behavior?
4.
S4, exactly. Now, just to explain this, if you look at the model, S4, it says delegating, which means it's low supportive, because you can see in this area of the screen, low on the supportive axis, low on the directive axis. So the person is highly competent, highly committed, so you don't need to give them lots of support and you don't need to give them lots of direction for them to do a good job. Make sense? Right? What happens in many organizations is that the leader does not do the proper analysis. And therefore the leader then spends lots of time and energy giving lots of attention and direction to people who don't need it. And then conversely, they give lots of attention and direction, and they don't give sometimes enough guidance to the person who does need it. Let's take this a step further. So D1, we said D1 is highly committed, but low competence. So if someone is very enthusiastic, what do they not need so much of? They're very enthusiastic. They really want to do a good job. They don't need so much of what?
Motivation.
Yeah. You don't need to spend all your time telling them you can do it. You know, I'll be there for you. They don't need that, but they're low in competence. What do they need more of?
Training.
Training and guidance. So if they're a D1, then what do they need in terms of the model? S1, S2, S3, or S4?
S1.
S1, right? Very clearly. So S1 is high directive behavior, but low supportive behavior. I think you can all see where I'm going with this, right? Very simply, the first thing that you do as a leader, as an organization, if you want to use your time, energy, and resources effectively, whenever you're giving a task to an individual, is to really understand their level of competence and commitment. Okay? But it's also how competent and committed are they in relation to the particular task that they've been given. It's not that there's everyone's, you know, oh, this person's a high performer and they are a high performer in all areas. No. How are they in relation to the task, right? What is their competence in relation to this task? What's their level of commitment or enthusiasm in relation to this task? And by getting that diagnosis correct, then you're able to understand how you as a leader need to assist them. Now let's go back a step. Let's go back to the member of the team. Let's call her Abby. Abby is the person who's won awards for making advertisements. And you know that she's a D4 when it comes to creating advertisements. You know that because she's a D4, you don't need to spend so much time telling her what to do because she's an expert. And you don't need to encourage her and motivate her because she's already motivated. So she's a D4 when it comes to making advertisements. There's a growing body of research, and it's brilliant. I'll be honest with you, it's brilliant research. And it's on the topic of what they call self-managing teams. Okay. Now, with self-managing teams, the research talks about how the leadership of self-managing teams creates the environment where the team are able to continue to execute and get things done, even when the leader isn't present. One of the key aspects of self-managing teams is that the leader is not the only one who trains people. The leader is not the only one who directs people. So within that context, if you have someone who's a D4 when it comes to making adverts, and you want others to also become good at making adverts, what do you do with that particular individual? What would you do with that particular individual? They're great at making adverts. Yes, sorry. Yes.
You make them trainer in this field for another team members.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you call it, so many of you will be familiar with this cross training. It's not that you as a leader have to do the training. You just have to set up the environment so that people who have the skills are also sharing that and teaching that to other people. So Abby, for example, when it comes to making adverts, she's a D4. You don't need to give her much time and attention because you know she'll do a great job with just a little, Abby, this is yours. I know you're great at this. I know you don't need me to, spend lots of time with you on this. Go and do a great job. And Abby, I'm going to ask you to train other people. Let's look at one more side on this. If Abby is a D4 in making advertisements and you still insist on spending hours with Abby, telling her every single detail that you want done, what could that do to the relationship between you and Abby? Thoughts?
It's going to go south for sure.
Sorry?
It's going to deteriorate.
Why? Why, Avantika?
First of all, when someone who, it tells the individual that my leader does not know how well I know the thing. It also tells the individual that the person doesn't trust me to handle the responsibility on my own. So it's trying to create some sort of a power distance just for the sake of it. So, and there's a lack of reward in it for the individual as well, because they're treated just the same as a new person who doesn't have the skill. So it does not, it undermines it.
Yeah, Avantika, I love the point. I love the way you bring those points to life. Absolutely. So now, if I'm a D4 in terms of putting together adverts, and you still spend an hour taking me through step by step as if I'm a new person, I may feel I'm being micromanaged. I may feel I'm being treated like as an inferior person, even though I know this better than you do, right? You're my manager, but I know that I'm good. I'm better at making adverts than you are, but you're still insisting on telling me, do this first, and then second you do this, and then third you do this, and then you check the spelling. Now, Avantika, I'm going to throw this out to all of you. Let's take it a step on. Abby, she's been given the task of making adverts. She's excellent at it, but the manager is still micromanaging her in this area. And the rest of the team are seeing that behavior from the manager. Now, what else could happen? How could the rest of the team start to deal with Abby? Because they've seen the manager micromanaging her in an area that actually she's better or more expert than her manager. What could that create in the culture of the team? Anyone?
It's on the many sides actually. From one side, like the Abby is the relationships are damaged because your reputation is damaged in the front of the team. So it's a perception, and then the team, depending on the rather new teams and like new members and old members, if the other members seeing that happens, they older can get protective and just also do a little bit less, just what is needed, not to get in the situation and not more. And for the new is just showing the culture or getting also with I don't know, some misunderstandings in the team,
Fantastic, Christina. Thank you very much. Was anyone else who wanted to add anything to that?
There will be a division in the teams, because there will be, there will be two camps, one that will be sympathetic towards Abby and one that will be, sycophant to the manager. Second is people who don't know Abby at all may not have respect for her to lead the tasks which she was supposed to lead, because they'll feel if she's getting quotes so much, then I might as well go to the manager. Why go to her?
Brilliant
So
point.
it could happen.
Yeah, and before, I'm just curious, how many of you have ever seen this kind of thing happen in your career? Just raise your hand. Exactly. Now there's even more to it. If the manager's spending all this time with Abby, they're wasting time, because in this task, she doesn't require all of that time and guidance. So there's an opportunity cost, and you mentioned this earlier, because now, instead of giving time to the people who need it, instead of giving time to the more strategic things that we could be doing as a manager, I'm wasting time micromanaging someone who's an expert in a particular task? Yes, Avantika.
I've seen this happen when the leader is a D1 leader and is insecure of the stars in their team and tries to create an environment where, it's undermining the high-performing person in the team. I've seen this happen a lot.
And I've seen it too, Avantika. I love that. I love that point. And that's a very good application. We'll come to that if we have time, about looking at D1, D2, D3, and D4 is specifically within the task of leadership, because it's a very, very interesting conversation as well. And I may get you to evaluate yourselves in that area. So you see where I'm going with this. Okay, now let's take the other side. How many of you have seen this happen? Someone is a D1 in relation to a task, okay? So they are incredibly enthusiastic. They really want to do a good job. They're very energized. They're very motivated, but they have no experience, okay? And the manager says, I don't want to micromanage you. Here you go, just do your best. How could they feel? How could that go badly? The person is enthusiastic, but they've never done the task before, but they're not getting the specific direction. What could go wrong? Anyone?
They'll lead to false confidence in what their ability is.
Yeah, tell me more, Rikin, though. Tell me more. That's an interesting point.
So, in fact, they'll move forward in a way, thinking that what they'll do is the best work or the correct work, and it will undo a lot of things for the leader, but also the rest of the team. Brilliant point. Why would it undo a lot of things for the leader and the team? Can you expand on that for me, please? Well, I mean, just looking at this model, there wasn't so much S2 or S1, right, up front. So they will go with what their idea of correct is.
And this is really important, because there's, in business right now, literally millions of hours are lost in rework. The D1, if based upon the task that you're giving them, the person who's a D1 in that task, they may not know what good looks like. They are highly committed, but they don't have competence. So when they run away and do the work and then come back with a substandard outcome, they're going to have to redo it again, or someone else has to redo it again, or they need to be told it's not what we need something different. Now, they start feeling frustrated. I worked so hard, I put so much effort in. It's not the effort, it's the competence that's the issue. You see, you can be highly committed in a particular task. That doesn't mean it's going to be done properly. Commitment is not enough. You also need to have competence. You see, there are many people in the world right now. There's two classes of people, you could say. Some people are more confident than they are competent. Has anyone seen that happen before? Right? They just feel like they know everything, but you can see you don't know what you're doing. You've got no idea. And then you have other people who are more competent, but less confident. So they actually can perform here, but they doubt themselves. And it's a very, very interesting thing that we see play out in the world. What really works for sustainable outcomes is when your level of confidence is equal to your level of competence. That's how it becomes sustainable. So Rikin, to your point, and to others to your point, yes, the D1, if they are just told to go and do it by themselves, they may feel lack of support. They may feel bewildered. It's like, I want to do a great job, but I've not received any direction. I didn't get any guidance. And then when they go and do it wrong, then they may feel, you know what, I think this person's setting me up for failure. I don't trust this manager. He or she, they're giving me tasks to do, but they don't tell me how to get it done. And whenever I come and bring it back, they're always telling me it's wrong. So then again, you start to sow the seeds of some difficulty in the professional relationship. Okay, now, so these are just some examples. So the D1, what they need according to this model is an S1 leadership style. They don't need much support because they are already enthusiastic, but what they do need a lot of is direction. Okay, so the S1 is low in support, but high in direction. And then, of course, you can kind of see how all of this maps out. So if someone's a D2, we said the D2 is low commitment. So their commitment is low, so they need a lot more support. So support has to be high. And we know a D2 also is low in competence, so they need a lot more direction as well. So if they're S1, so if they're a D1, they need an S1 leadership style. If they're a D2, they need an S2 leadership style. If they're a D3, D3 is their commitment is variable. So that, you know, sometimes they're committed, sometimes they're not committed. But we know that they have moderate competence, so they can do the job, right? So for the D3, they need an S3 style. That means they don't need much direction. They can do it. We know that you're moderately competent in this area, so you can do the job. But the issue is you're not motivated. So what you need from me is more encouragement and motivation. Yeah, you can do it, right? You can do it. You just need to believe in yourself, etc., etc., etc. And then we gave the last one already. If they're a D4, highly committed, highly competent in relation to that particular task, they don't need much support, they don't need much direction, and they can also be used to train other individuals, okay? So this is a very, very interesting model because it brings together what we said. It brings together, first of all, direction. So I understand the reality, well, it's actually, no, we'll go in different order. First of all, it brings together the fact that there's a task to be done. So destination, I need to get this outcome, point number one. Then point number two, we look at the situation, right? So who am I dealing with? I'm dealing with this team member. How committed are they in this task? How competent are they in this task? Okay, so that's the reality, understanding the situation. And then when I understand the goal and the situation, then I can choose what support they need from me or from others in order to do a good job, right? And that's the drive. That's how do I act now? Now I know what the task is that they have. Now I know how committed and competent they are. Then I can figure out what support do I need to give them so that they can do their best work, okay? Now, I'm gonna do a different activity with you and then we'll open up for questions. Avantika, you shared a brilliant point that we can have leadership in each of these 4 areas, okay? I want you to take a moment to write this down. What does a D1 leader look like? So let's do this carefully together. The task is leading people, okay? So let's go back to what we said here. I'll just bring this up again. So we start with the task that we need to get done, the outcome. We need someone who's good at leading people. That's the task, that's the goal. Okay, now we're gonna look at these 4 levels of development. So I want you to think about and write down, what does a D1 leader look like? How does he or she behave? Just write down a few ideas, a few bullet points. Think about your own experience in your career. Some of you, you've seen a D1 leader. He or she, they're incredibly committed, but they're not competent. Tell me about the behavior. How do they tend to behave? How do they tend to treat the team? How do they tend to act? Write down a few notes for me, okay? I'll give you a few seconds. A D1 leader. You can write this down. Okay, someone in relation to the task of leading people who's a D1. How does he or she behave? What do they do? What do they not do? Any descriptions? And you can tune into your own experience. Okay, think about it carefully. Next, we're going to take it in a different order. I want you to think about someone who's a D4 in terms of leading people. Okay, write down a few notes. Someone who's a D4, highly competent, highly committed in terms of leading people. What are some of the things that they do? How do they behave? Write down some notes. A D4 in terms of leadership, leading people. Write down some thoughts. Okay, so once you've done that, and the next two are a little bit more subtle, so please think about it carefully. Now think about D2, and I'll remind you that someone who's D2, low commitment, okay, and low to some competence. So if a leader is a D2 in leadership, right? So the person is a D2 in leadership, his or her commitment is low, and their competence is lowish, low to some competence. How do they behave? Write that down. A D2 in terms of people leadership. Write down some ideas. How do they tend to behave? What are some of the things that you tend to see them do, not do? And then the last one, someone who is a D3 in terms of leadership. So again, to remember, they have moderate competence. It's important to really understand that. So they can do it, but their commitment is variable, okay? Their commitment is variable, up and down. So someone who's a D3 in leadership, write down some ideas. How will they tend to lead? How will they tend to behave? And once you've done that, I'm going to ask you to use one of the emoticons, one of the reactions, just to pull a thumbs up or something, just to let me know we're all on the same page. You've written your notes for D1, D2, D3, and D4 in terms of leadership. Just let me know that you've done your notes on all four. Okay, I can see Paul's just, I think, going to get a pen or something. It's okay. Okay, I can see Ricken's written, Avantika's written the notes. Okay, Christina's done, fantastic. Ami, thank you for indicating you've done. Great to see you. Enver, thank you, good to see you as well. Okay, I'm just checking if Navanita and Siddharth, if you're ready for us to start to explore this. Thank you, Navanita. Just checking in, Siddharth, is that okay? Okay, maybe Siddharth's actually just stepped away. Paul, are you ready, or do you need a bit more time? Oh, battery. Ah, okay. Okay, no worries. Okay, we're gonna debrief this. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go step by step to really, and this is a great way to really understand this model. We're gonna look at this model in relation to the task of leading people. And we're gonna start to explore what it looks like in each of these four stages.
And before you go on, do you mind just unsharing your screen so we just get a bigger view of the people speaking?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
No problem at all. Okay, so let's start with someone who is a D1 in terms of leadership. So they're highly committed, but they have low competence. You all make your notes. I just want to hear from one or two people. What were some of the things that you'd expect to see if someone is a D1 in terms of leadership?
I was thinking that they would be enthusiastic, but they'd also be learning on the job.
Yes. Yeah.
And so to a certain extent, they may have to fake it a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. Now, Ricky, let me take it a step further. What if they're enthusiastic and they are a D1, but they don't know that they're a D1? Because that does happen. I can see people smiling. We all see that someone is not very competent, but they think that they are. How does that look? Anyone? Anyone can unmute and just share. Any thoughts? You all wrote some things down. Ami, I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I unmute. Hi, it's good to see you after a long time.
Good to see you too.
So I was thinking more around the lines of people basically thinking they're full of themselves or that they know it all, basically. So it just creates lack of confidence in the leader because of that they're not ready to really be open and they're very fixed in their belief.
Yeah, very powerful point. So they are enthusiastic, and sometimes they've confused their enthusiasm for their actual competence. And now it can cause some real issues as well. So absolutely. But Ricken, in the best case scenario, you're right. If someone is low in competence and they know that they're low in competence, then they can, with the enthusiasm, they can really try to learn and grow, etc. Avantika, I saw you've unmuted as well. Was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, when I was studying situation leadership, there was a word here, a phrase called loose cannons that was applied to this, that literally, so, but you know, with time, so yeah, so if they don't know and stuff, so all of that, the cocky, the defensiveness, the insecurity, all of that. I want to make a point, that's why I muted myself, that in the environment we're in today, we have a lot of innovative greenfield startup kind of environments where we have a lot of people getting into this mode because there's no precedence. It's unprecedented stuff. So I think self-knowledge, self-awareness, and quickly getting oneself up the curve, first of all, knowing the gap between. So for example, I'm a startup entrepreneur, and I've been an award-winning strategist in my previous company, but here I have spent 2 years being in the D1 because of just the demands of the environment. But that self-awareness is so important.
I think that's a great point. I think that's a really good point, because I was going to ask, and let's take it more into this space. What does that person in the D1 space, right? And again, I really want to emphasize, there's no such thing as a D1 person, but all of us will be D1 or D2 or D3 or D4, depending on the task. So Avantika, I love the point you made. In another role, you may have been like, let's say D4, right? I don't know, but I'm just speculating, but it makes sense to me, right? But then now in this situation, you're a D1, you're enthusiastic, but there's a lot to learn and things are constantly changing. So if someone's a D1, in terms of leading people, how would you support them? Give me some practical things. Again, thinking about what we said here, right? If they're a D1 in terms of leading people and you're their leader, you need to take an S1 approach, okay? Give me some examples. What kind of direction do you need to give someone like that for them to get better and to progress? Give me some tangible examples of things that they need. I know Ricken started this off. He said that they'll need training. Give me some more things. What do they need to move forward?
Need a lot. I mean, I'm speaking for what I've needed. A lot of strategic exposure from masterminds, peers, a lot of incubators, accelerator kind of programs, people who have been experts in the field who can show the ropes and stuff like that. So learning and development, but done more from a perspective, if you're talking about a leader, from the perspective of teaching them that environment in an incubated, accelerated format. So that's probably what's the best.
Excellent, excellent. So you see how the two things connect. We said they need a lot more direction. They don't need encouragement. They're enthusiastic, but they need specific direction to build up their competence. So Avantika, translating what you said, that can also be in the form of mentors. It can be coaching, right? And if they're in that space of a D1 in terms of leadership, is it something that they can get if they just have like half an hour once a year? Is that going to be enough? Tell me about the frequency.
It takes about, to move from a D1, the objective is to move from D1 to D4. You know, you don't want to move anywhere else. You want to go, yes. I mean, your magic quadrant is D4.
Yes.
So to get from a D1 to a D4 at an accelerated pace takes about 18 months at a minimum in order to have the transformation, the exposure, the expertise, the ability to think like an expert in the field would. And that's why newly promoted managers, a lot of millennials in the workforce who are taking on roles where they have minimum experience, but you know, they're taking on high responsibility roles. So organizations and entrepreneurs and everyone need to understand that it takes a minimum learning curve of 18 months in order to get to D4, a minimum.
And again, I'm going to push you on this, the frequency of, so where they're getting trained, where they're getting mentored, does it work if the mentoring comes, let's say, once every 6 months?
Oh, no. I've had to invest 10x the amount of investment in personal development, professional coaching, business coaching, invest about almost like 10 to 15 hours of coaching a week consistently in order to get to where I am. And I would consider myself a D4 right now. But when I started up 3 years in this area, I was a total D1. But it's taken, like even being part of this group is one of my investments into this whole thing.
Fantastic. Yes, so that's a really important point. So the D1, they need a lot of support in terms of direction in relation to the particular task, and you've given very tangible examples, mentoring, guidance, and it should be frequent, right? Excellent. This is a great start. So we're doing this, we want to make it very tangible. Let's go to the other extreme. Someone is a D4 in relation to leading people. We're going to go to the other extreme now. Tell me about how do they behave? How does this look? How does a D4 in terms of people leadership, how does that look? How does that manifest? How do they deal with others? I want to give me some description. Anyone? Paul.
It seems to me that they would set obviously clear directions, but they would manage every member of the team differently based on what type of support they needed. And for those that are in a D4 role, they would let them do their thing and empower them to do what it is that they do best. And based on ideally collaboration with the D4 leader, then support that leader in whatever areas would help that leader succeed.
Absolutely, Paul. And it's very interesting what you said, because yes, one of the characteristics of a D4 leader, right, someone who's D4 in terms of people leadership, is they actually follow this model. Someone who's a real expert in leadership does not lead everyone in the same way, because it's actually ineffective and inefficient. A real D4 leader knows who needs more attention, who needs less attention, who needs more direction and guidance, who needs less, who needs more encouragement, who needs less, and they make their leadership very personalized. Very, very important. And Paul, I'm going to push you on this. How do they get that support? Because in the world that we live in, sometimes people may think, well, why are you giving that person more time than this person? How do they explain what they're doing so that they get the buy-in, and so that people don't think, oh, he's got favorites or she's got favorites? Because they tend to give a lot more time and energy to this person, and with this person they're a bit more hands-off. How would the D4 leader explain what they're doing and explain why they're dealing with different members of the team in a different way, Paul?
I honestly don't know that answer. So I basically, in my leadership role, I try to support people the way they need to be supported. I typically have team meetings, 15 minutes every morning, a quick scrum, and then I have one-on-ones with the people as needed to support them. So I don't know that it's group environment, particularly in today's Zoom world. So
okay. Anyone? That's a fair point. That's a fair point. Anyone else? How would you explain this? Because our model that we've been speaking about is a very differentiated model in terms of personalizing the level of support and the level of encouragement for each and every individual. How do I explain that so that people don't misperceive and think, you know what, you've got favorites, because I see you giving a lot of encouragement to this person and less to this person. Avantika.
Well written here. There's a lot of decentralization of power and a lot of participative leadership styles. So in fact, a lot of people, a good D4 leader has everyone in the team believing that they're the favorite. So that's really, one kind of thing. And if very effective delegation is the thing. So typically, I'll give you an example of, something that was done in my team way back. I think this was in 2010 or 11. And there was, an initiative. I was working for an enterprise which was very socially contributive. And we wanted to integrate certain people who were differently abled. They couldn't speak or hear, but they were educated. And there was a gap, but we wanted to fill the gap and integrate them into our we used to do tech support and technical, coding and stuff for companies. Mm-hmm. So that required, 60 people being integrated into a team of 700 people. And obviously these people would require a lot more coaching, a lot more time, a lot more thing, and a lot of leeway would be given. and I was leading that team. And one of the ways we were able to be so successful in that over 18 months, every single one of those people that we brought on went on to, you can just imagine what alternative career options they had in a country like India, but they went on to become, very respectable technical support professionals. And, some of them went on to become even leading the management. But the way it was done was that instead of making Avantika's initiative, it was opened to everyone, and 700 people learned the sign language. 700 people got involved. We were buddied one-on-one with those people. It became their journey, their story. When it became their journey and their story, everyone supported it so beautifully that it was bound to be successful. And no one felt like there was something is being done. I think participative leadership styles, when that vision is kind of shared and it becomes their vision instead of your vision, that's what a skillful D4 leader does.
Fantastic, good stuff. Any other comment on that, Rikin?
Just the comment, going back to your question and just building on what Avantika was saying, is that I think for the people that are maybe getting less time and attention, I would hope that the D4 would identify them as competent and committed, and having that conversation with that type of leader up front to tell them, basically you're encouraging and empowering them, saying that, I trust what you do, so my efforts are going to be put towards those that are less experienced. But if you need anything, I'm here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's about how we frame it, letting them know, look, it's not, I hear you, I see, and I acknowledge the great work you're doing. And because of that, because I know you're so competent, I'm not going to be directing, because that will be inappropriate. It'll be out of alignment with what you need. But you may see me speaking a bit more of the newcomers, the person who's got less experience in this particular area, because they'll need a bit more of my time. But also I recognize and appreciate that you're a subject matter expert in this area, and I'm going to leverage you to also help the others as well. So then you have more people getting things done and playing to their strengths. One of the things that I've often been speaking to managers about in this area also is the incentivization. So if we have someone who's a D4 in a particular task, one of the things that you may think about doing in their performance development is putting down that one of the things I'm going to expect you to do is to train others in the areas where you are expert, right? And you're going to be recognized for that, both publicly and also maybe in terms of performance development, your compensation or your performance at the end of the year, annual review, whatever it is. So then I know that not only is it recognized that I'm an expert in a certain area, but also I will also be recognized by making other people also experts in that same area. It's a very, very important thing. And we often find that if you don't do that, if you don't have that objective, that performance objective, then we breed a culture of selfishness, whereby I'm an expert. I don't want anyone else to be as good as I am. So I'm going to keep all my skills, all my knowledge, all my expertise to myself, so that I can become superior to other people rather than helping everyone else to come up. You see? So it's really important. I was dealing with some people in the UK, and I saw that they had that mentality. So, they call it game theory, right? So we'll tell everyone we should all cooperate, but you can see they actually are just keeping things for themselves. And so when I saw that, I thought immediately, you know what? I'm not going to cooperate with you guys, because I can see that you've got your own selfish agenda while you're pretending that we're all in this together. You see? So that transparency is really important. Avantika, I saw you on mute. Was there anything you want to share before we step on?
That's one last thing about the D4 leadership style that I just want to bring up is that, Robin Sharma said this beautifully. And this again, the reason why people feel insecure when they're at the top and they want to keep people down is because they feel they've reached the ceiling. And Robin Sharma says, if you're the smartest person in the room, get a new room. And it's very important for D4 leaders to keep reinventing, because that white belt mentality, go into something that you're absolutely a novice in again, and rebuild. I think in one's entire career, one should do that at least 2 or 3 times, where one is absolutely pushing oneself out of one's comfort zone and rebuilding and regaining that hunger and that drive which got them to the D4 and that thing. That takes so what would a manager or a leader of D4 leaders do? Create very effective career planning and progression for D4 leaders so that they can reinvent themselves and get into new rooms. And sometimes that may even mean if the organization is too small to contain them, then very effectively help them, encourage them to find, an enterprise that can do that for them.
That's definitely one very, very valuable approach that can be taken. I mean, it's a very interesting, it's a very, very interesting and very big topic. So one thing is to go to different rooms. Sometimes even if someone is a D4 leader, they sometimes can also be used to mentor and guide the next generation of leaders. So that can also be very, very powerful. If you're see, people confuse leadership with management. Management is the ability to execute and get stuff done. Leadership is the ability to inspire people with vision, enthusiasm, and to take things to another level. So there's many different ways in which it can be used. Let's take a step on. So we've talked about a D1 leadership style, right? So D1 in terms of people leadership. We've talked about D4 in terms of people leadership. Before we go on, I'm going to ask you a very important question. What's the difference? What's the key difference between someone who's in the D2 space in terms of people leadership and a D3 space in terms of people leadership? What's the key difference? I want to see if you caught this. Any ideas between someone who's a D2 in terms of leadership and a D3 in terms of leadership? There's one thing that's different, and there's one key thing that's different, and there's one key thing that's exactly that's similar. So what's the difference and what's the similarity between someone's a D2 in terms of leadership of people and someone's a D3 in terms of leadership of people? Let's see if anyone picked that up. Avantika, you are muted. Was there something you wanted to share?
No, I mean, in response to your question, could it be that there's just like the commitment levels are variable for the D3, but they are very low for the D2?
Yeah.
So sabotage, there could be almost sabotage that the D2 person could be doing. Yeah, so that's a similarity. For both D2 and D3, we know that the commitment can either be variable or low, so it's not strong. And that's something that they have in common. What's different between the two of them is that in the D2 space, their competence is low. But the D3, what do we know about their competence as a D3? What do we know about the competence of a D3? They have sweet spots. They have sweet spots where they might be good in, and inconsistency, but they could be good in certain sweet spots. Yeah. So in the D3, we said they have moderate competence, so they can do that particular task. Whereas the D2, they have low competence, so they're still in that space where they need to learn. Okay, but in both cases, there's a lack in terms of the commitment. Now, let me just ask a question. So think about this. Someone is in the D3 space in terms of leadership. They can do the task, they can do the job because we know they're a D3, so they're moderate competence, but their commitment is variable. What can cause that? What can cause someone who can do the job to lack enthusiasm to do it? What have you seen in your career, in your life? Someone you can see, like, you can do it. I know you can do it, but I can see also that you don't have that same drive or commitment. What can be the cause of that? Any guesses, any thoughts?
I'll take a stab at it. It could be that they're not aligned to the vision. So there is a misalignment between what is expected and what they are expecting. So there's an expectations misalignment as well. Absolutely. So I mean, I really love that point. So one thing is, you may have someone who's a great people manager, or they're a good people manager, but you know what? They don't align with the values of the company. I don't believe in the vision of the company. I don't believe what they're trying to do. I don't even agree with the way that they're treating the staff. So even though I can do the job, I'm not enthusiastic to do it. Very, very interesting. What else? What could be another reason why someone who can do the job of people leadership is not enthusiastic to do it? Give me some other reasons. Anyone? They may feel that their approach to leadership is not aligned with their own leader, that their style is not actually received well, or that there's lack of trust between themselves and their own leader itself.
I mean,
and that cascades downwards.
I mean, that's absolutely correct. I had an experience with that. I had an experience with that once. It wasn't in terms of work. It wasn't in terms of paid work, but I was involved in something and I thought, you know what? I don't trust the leadership anymore. And so even though I could do certain things in that particular sphere, I thought, you know what? I see that these people, there's some politics, there's deceitfulness, and I lost trust. And therefore my whole shift moved in a different direction. So yeah, it could also be because they feel a lack of alignment or a lack of trust with their leaders. There's a very interesting piece of research on this, that people, when they leave an organization, they do not leave because of the organization itself. The research firmly shows that when people leave an organization, they leave because of who? Any guesses?
Their manager.
The manager. It's the number one. And that's one of the reasons why when we speak about this stuff, it's so powerful. Because with good leadership, people will stay and they will go above and beyond. With bad leadership, people will leave and they will tell so many other people. Statistics have shown when people leave an organization because of bad leadership, in the past, they would tell 10 people if they had a bad experience. That was in the past. What's changed? Any guesses?
Social media.
Social media. Now that negative experience can go viral, okay? So now a lot more people here, you know what? I used to work for this company, they're terrible. They're like this, they're like that, the manager's like this, the manager's like that. And let's be honest, because it's word of mouth, it will have much more believability than the official websites of the organization, which are just talking about how wonderful they are. So it's a big point. Good. So let's tune into this. So we've spoken a little bit about why people can be in a D3 space. So what does it look like? Give me some examples. Someone who's a D3 in terms of people leadership, he or she, their commitment is not very strong, but they can do it. What kind of behaviors do we see in a situation like this? A D3 in terms of people leadership. Anyone? What does this look like?
Controlling.
Okay, tell me more, Amy.
So they have friction with their leader. I'm thinking it out loud. That will trickle downstream. So they can, because of that misalignment, they can be more micromanaging with their team, or depending on the same relationship with their leader, they can be totally laissez-faire as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that up and down of consistency will also confuse the team members on how to receive this person. Yeah,
absolutely, Amy. They may think, you know what, I don't really care. I'm not invested anymore in this because I don't agree with it, and so they start to check out. So we call this disengagement. Avantika, you are muted. Was there anything you wanted to share? What does someone who's in a D3 space in terms of leading people, what does it look like? Any thoughts?
Someone who's in the D3 space would be disengaged. In organizations, the frontline management, which is the direct manager, the team leader of the base of the pyramid, really, it's probably one of the most critical, more critical than even in terms of leadership of people.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it could be, yes, there's certain, by the time it comes down there's certain policies the organization has which are punitive or disenfranchising. There's certain cultural issues, but there's also one more thing. There could be something absolutely outside of the workforce that's happening to the leader. It could be a change in a life event. Maybe they're getting divorced, maybe they've lost a partner, maybe they've had a diagnosis. So it's very important because people spend so much of their time at work the leader also has to be aware of what's going on in their lives outside of work, because a lot of times, more than 60 to 70% of the cases of people who go into D3 is people who are having issues. And right now, mental health, personal life events and stuff like that are big.
Absolutely. So what? Let's take this on even further. So, and this is to all of you. Someone who's in a D3 space, what do they need in order to help them to progress up to a higher level? Right. So we know it could be things happening in the office, it could be things happening outside of work, but they're in a D3 space. What do they need? Paul, I saw you've unmuted.
I think they need a good connection and alignment with their leader and some support through whatever it is that they're going through to help them get back and aligned. And sometimes that does require crossing the line of work and personal, but even just sort of an empathetic connection goes a really long way.
Absolutely. And how do you start to build that? So let's say you've noticed that someone in your company who's a leader of people, for whatever reason, they've gotten into this or they're in this space of D3. You know that they're competent, they've got moderate competence, but you've seen that their commitment, their enthusiasm is up and down. You can see sometimes they're just not bothered, as Ami said, laissez-faire. How do you approach this person to help them to come up to a higher level, please, Paul?
I find
I'm sorry, Paul.
Well, no, it's all good. So I personally find just sort of an empathetic, caring conversation goes a really long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Opening up for that dialogue really is important. I saw Christina, you wanted to share something. So Christina, I'd like to hear your contribution as well.
Yeah, I think the main thing is to figure out what is the reason, because it's obviously as that I, as a leader, missed the change, what happened. So instead of making conclusions, the first is just to figure out where it lays, this engagement.
Absolutely.
And if it's possible to get it back. Yeah.
Excellent. And it's interesting, if you look at the situational leadership model, we see here that because they have moderate competence, it's not that they need lots of direction. It's more on the commitment side, the support side, the encouragement side. I know you can do it. You've done this for many years. We're here to help you. We're here to support you. What do you need from us? How can we help you to do your best work? Is there an issue, right? Do you have feedback for me as your manager? What can I do to help you to be better? That's really important. So let's go to the last one. So D2, a D2 in terms of leadership of people, we know that the commitment is low, and we know that the competence is also low. So tell me about this kind of leader. What is he or she doing? How do they look? Thoughts? Anyone?
They look like the team needs to be protected from them because they could be quite dangerous. Why intervention?
Why danger? I like that word, but I need to expand on that. What do you mean by dangerous?
Because it's clearly someone who is going to doesn't have any qualms about sabotaging the team's performance or outcomes, and therefore while interventions of coaching, mentoring, and directing can be taken, but I think it's very important to at that point in time to have the leader kind of play a quasi-leader role in that leader's team as well, just for a bit, or to create some other support system so that the team is not this way. So that's the first one. The second one is that it's always, because there's such a loss of trust at this point, it's always good to get a third-party intervention from a peer leader or some other party involved, so that there can be neutral and bias-free conversations that can take place. Yeah.
Excellent. So if someone's in a D2 space, they need an S2 star, which is highly directive and highly supportive. Okay, very, very important. Highly directive, highly supportive. So you touched upon the idea that this person may need a lot of training. What can we do to help this person who's in a D2 space to build their commitment again? Any thoughts there? How do you turn around someone who is feeling a little bit, let's say, low commitment in terms of the role? What could cause that, and how do you turn it around? Ami, I saw you'd unmuted. Was there anything you wanted to share?
I was going to say that in order to get that alignment first, right, we have to start with the basics, right? So what is the goal? Like, what are they trying to achieve? What does good look like to them? And what does it look like to the manager, to their own leader? And map out that journey. And along the way, set up the milestones. So there has to be a conscious effort to put a plan together and to have that plan supported along the way. And then provide the feedback necessary. So there will be moments of coaching and there will be moments of feedback, and to distinguish between the two.
Excellent. I think it's really, really comprehensive. And I love the idea of the training plan, because they know that we've got a map, we're investing in you, but we're also expecting you to hit certain milestones and move forward as well. Absolutely. Great stuff. Well, I'm going to ask us all to do now. Let's see, 2, 4, 6. Okay. We have about 8 people, minus myself, maybe Ricken. We're going to put you into small groups. And you know, you can be as open and honest as you wish. What I'd like you to share is, where do you see yourself in terms of people leadership? Are you a D1? Are you a D2 for whatever reason? These are positions that people can be in because of externals or internal things. So there's no criticism. But you yourself right now, in terms of leading people, and again, I do emphasize this is task specific. So when we use the goal of, or the destination of leading people, where are you? Are you a D1, a D2, a D3, a D4? That's 1 point. And second, what do you need to move up? Okay. I want you to answer that question, and we're going to put you into small groups to have that discussion. I'm going to ask Ricken, sorry. I'm going to ask if you can either make pairs. Okay, if you can do pairs. Is there anyone who needs to leave anytime soon or not? Is there anyone who needs to leave soon? Sorry, Ami, when do you need to leave?
I will need to drop at about 8:55. So
okay, that's fine. We've got plenty of time. Enver?
I can stay 10 or 15 minutes more.
Okay, so why don't we do this? We're going to give you 10 minutes in pairs, because I want you to digest this. We've spoken it, we've gone through it, we've given some examples, we've explained what these things look like, so you've got a real sense of how to use the model. Now I want you to get into pairs, and I want you to talk about yourself in this area. Where am I in terms of people leadership? And then what do you need? Either to sustain where you are, if you feel you're in a very good place, or to move and progress to be stronger in your people leadership. And here, the key thing is, share what you need and write down ideas. I want it to be things that are within your control, even if it's going to be mentoring. But, you know, okay, I'm going to reach out to at least 10 people and ask them to give me some mentoring, whatever it is. Okay, but where am I in terms of development level for people leadership? What do I need, and how do I intend to get it? Are there any questions before we start the breakout room discussion for 10 minutes in pairs? Okay, so Ricken, if you could send them into the breakout rooms in pairs for 10 minutes, and then after 10 minutes, we'll come back in. Okay, so you had about 10 minutes. And we're not expecting anyone to reveal their development level. It's just an opportunity to share any reflections that you've had from the model, from the discussions, anything that you've taken away. It could be things that you're going to do differently with your team. It could be things that you've kind of realized about yourself and your journey, things that you're going to be working on to take yourself to a higher level, whatever it is. Just an open forum to discuss and share any insights. Who'd like to begin?
I'm going to start.
Ami.
So I think my biggest takeaway is really that people are going to be in different spaces. They're not the D1 person or the D2 person, nor are the leaders, right? So leaders are also not the S1s, the S2s, and the harmony really comes in when we're more aware of that, being and both sides are more aware of it, and then they can have that constructive conversation. So I think that's the biggest takeaway here today for me. Thank you.
Fantastic. I mean, that's brilliant. And just to reinforce what you're saying, it's all about the alignment. You see, it's all about the alignment. And to your point, it's also about the self-awareness, because if I know that I'm in a certain space in relation to this task and you do too, then we can get the right level of support to really take me forward. And oftentimes the issues that happen in teams and in companies is because of a mismatch between what the person is being given and what they actually need. So thank you very much for kicking us off there. Who else would like to share any takeaways? Any takeaways? Enver.
So we discussed with Christina. Thank you, Christina, for the detailed insight. And we come up that this tool helps us very good to analyze where we are, how we can go forward. And these are the main gains for me, I think.
Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you. So again, this idea that the first thing to do is understand, where am I, right? Where do I need to go? And then I know what I need to do to really move in that direction positively. Absolutely. And that can work in many different areas as well. To your point, to a point that was made earlier by, I think, Avantika, that same three stages, those same three stages of the situation or the reality, the action, the goal, that can also be used in developing careers. So oftentimes what people do as a manager, they'll ask people, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? So that's destination, okay? Then they'll look at where are you right now? So that's reality or direction. And then based upon where you want to be 5 years from now and where you are, that then helps me to determine, what do I need to do? Activity, execution. What do I need to do now to assist you on the journey from where you are to where you want to be? So thank you for that, Enver. Who else? What have you been thinking about, Avantika?
So, when we started this whole series of conversations from part one, I kind of caught this word. You brought up destiny. You brought up good luck. As part of the final thing. So there was direction. There was, the endeavor, and then there was. With the destination, there was also something about fortune and good luck and things like that. And I was thinking of certain, lucky leaders, Elon Musk, right? When he did his PayPal thing, and then, he obviously went from D1 all the way to D4, turned that around, and then he went to Tesla, and then, Tesla isn't doing so great right now, but and with with SpaceX, he's still, finding his feet. He's not definitely a D4 at all over there, but he's an incredibly lucky person. Yes. What I observed from that is that how he's being able to create, certain aspects of luck, and a lot of it from the leadership DNA's perspective is coming from not just the situational leadership of the people that he's managing, but of himself. So if one was to kind of see myself as one of the persons I'm leading, what leadership style am I applying to myself? And then what kind of luck am I creating in the outcomes as a result of that?
Excellent point. Yeah, that's a very good one. How we're leading ourselves, what level, D1, D2, D3, or D4. Some people, the way that they organize their life, very enthusiastic, but not very competent. So there's a bit that we can do there. I would also say, and this is where it touches upon some of the higher teachings of the Vedic knowledge, it also has to do with karma. It also has to do with certain practices. If people want to generate good fortune, I know that you had Satyananda Swami, and he took all of you through a particular spiritual practice. That spiritual practice is very, very powerful for many reasons. One of them being that it also generates good fortune, right? Also connecting with such very, let's say, spiritually conscious people, leaders such as Satyananda Swami, also generates good fortune. So there is a whole science to that too, which we can obviously get into on another occasion. But thank you, Avantika, for that. Who else would like to share? I'm going to invite, if Christina, you'd like to share, or Navanita or Rikin, anything that you wanted to share that you took away from the session. Christina.
I mean, hello. The Enver was a little bit saying that, but maybe just adding to this, taking to this that the karma is actually our making here. So it's just like coming back to the tool, it's really amazing tool. I just love it. How suddenly some things are getting tangible, you know, instead being intangible. So suddenly you can reflect to yourself and get a total clarity of where you are, also where the company or your team member or your superior are, and what the reasons are for it, where you can figure out. But it gives you back the power to move to the making, and then just place a strategy, okay, in which direction and what it is for me or not. So it's a beautiful tool. Thank you a lot, and we enjoyed it a lot. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Christina. Yeah, absolutely. The tool gives a tremendous amount of clarity. You know exactly what to look for. I've got a task. This is the person who's doing it. How committed are they? Right? How competent are they? And if I know these things and I know exactly what they need from me in order to move forward. Otherwise, we see so many companies, they're frustrated because they don't have clarity about the situation, and that causes a frustration. So thank you very much for that, Christina. Anyone else? Rikin, yes.
Yeah, just this point, I think that you brought up again, and we've discussed it before, but just a reminder to always ask ourselves on a team, I know I can do it better, is when we have a task, asking that question every time, like making it a habit, how committed, how competent they are. Yes. Because that really will pave the way for what kind of support they need and every action moving forward. And just that habit of asking that question of pretty much of anyone for anything we ask to do, that will always, I think, be very, you know, it really helps. Again, that I think that when I look at that question, that's more of the, you know, it goes back to the direction. It's kind of setting the foundation. And yeah, thank you for that reminder again, to kind of help, you know, reintegrate it and make it a habit when we're, you know, when we're in that position. So thank you.
No, thank you. Very, very good. And on that point also, now maybe give this as the last point. There's also one last dimension which I'll just touch upon now, but it's very easy to understand, so it won't take long. And that is that also when you know the constraints that you have, that can also help you to make choices about who you give what to. So for example, if you know that your time is short and you don't have that time to give lots of guidance and so on, and you have a member of your team who's a D4 in that task, and you know it's an emergency, we need it done first time, we need it done well, you go straight to the D4, right? I know that I can give it to him or her and they can get it done quickly and high quality. If I've got a bit more time, then I may want to develop others who come to that space over time. But if it's an emergency, I can go straight to, okay, this is D4, we need a situation where we need the outcome, we need this task done. He or she's a D4 in this task. We have very little time to train anyone, so therefore we can't take the risk on it, because if this goes wrong, it will delay the entire project. So I'm going to give it straight to that particular person. So there's a whole other realm of application based upon the capacity that you have that you can use. When I was preparing for this class, I'll be honest with you, I didn't do this because I thought maybe there won't be time, but I was putting together a graph. And in the graph, what I was showing was a particular individual. And I was showing if you give this individual a task that they are a D4 in, then that 1 hour, they'll give you 100 units of output. You give the same individual a task where they're a D1, the output will be less. If you give them a task where they're a D2, there can even be negative outcomes, right? Because now they're bleeding into the negativity because they're not happy doing it. So if you look at it, then what you see is you can have the same team and the output can be vastly different according to what you're giving them to do. You see, and the excitement there is that that means that in your organization, depending on how you allocate the tasks, you may get 100 units of output or 10 units of output, depending on who you're giving the task to and the support, the direction that you're also giving to that individual. Okay, so just planting a seed there, something to think about. Anyway, we are at time. I wanted to say thank you to all of you again. It's always a pleasure to be sharing something with the Titans. We want to encourage you, especially I know you have these sessions where you get together for your japa, for your mantra meditation. We want to encourage you in that. Very, very powerful practice. And really the conclusion of all this Vedic or Eastern knowledge is to engage in such activities so you can really generate the good fortune that can allow new possibilities to develop in your personal life, in your professional life, and especially in our consciousness, in our internal life as well. Thank you very much for your time and your association. And I look forward to seeing you guys at a future event, program, occasion, etc. Take care. Wishing you all the
Thank you,
best.
Ed. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank
Have a
you,
good
Rican.
weekend.
Thank you. Thank you.
And happy holidays.
Yeah, before everyone
Bye-bye.
leaves, I just wanted to announce this was, thank you, Ed, for joining us again and just providing a really powerful session where give us wisdom, but also give us a chance to apply it and discuss it. I think there's a lot more layers that we can unpeel. So just really grateful for your time. I know there have been questions coming at me about recording. So this was a gift that I really wanted to share with everyone. I'm just putting in the Dropbox now, but it's taken quite a bit of time to put it together. But going back to March, we have a private YouTube channel that we've created for all of us to be able to go back to all of the recordings, at least that we've been able to document with time on everything we've done since going back to at least the month of March. And so if everyone can see that, everything's in one spot for everyone. So hopefully if people have missed recordings, everything is there. If people want to go back to something, it's there. And yeah, it's just I have like a wonderful team member behind me joining us today for our special Titan book club event. Yeah, just wanted to just thank Aditya, who's a longtime friend who's been in the background helping with this channel, putting it together. And so, yeah, this is just a small token of appreciation for everyone's time for coming out. And hopefully, it puts everything together and gives everyone a chance to go back and reflect on things that they may have missed.
Wonderful. Thank you for doing that. Really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to learning from the other speakers and their classes and so on. I know that I attended some which were by Simon House, and that was really, really good stuff. Really impressive. Yeah. Okay. Have a good weekend.
This concludes our Titan Zooms for 2021, and we were already making plans for January of 2022. So please stay tuned.
Wonderful.
If anyone else has ideas of speakers as well, we're really open. So please, feel free to message and love to work together.
Okay.
Rican,
Bye-bye.
This for your big day and the journey.
Thank you.
Yes.
I leave tomorrow, so please, well wishes, good fortune, prayers, any of those are always welcome at this time.
Thank you. Take care.
All the success and luck on the way.
Thank you, Christina. Thanks, Avantika. Thanks, Navneeta, and for everyone for joining and for us to be able to be together and grow together. Thank you.
Thanks for giving the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, take care, everyone.